Want to skip the setup headaches and get straight to preparing returns? You're in the right place. In this session, we're breaking down everything you need to configure ProConnect Tax like a pro. EFIN verification, user permissions, print settings, the works. Stay with us to the end, and you'll have your firm ready to roll without the trial and error frustration. Let's make setup simple and get you on to what you do best.
Hello. Thank you so much for being here with me today for this session called Setup and Firm Administration. This is for Intuit ProConnect Tax, and we'll be spending some time this morning, this evening, this afternoon, wherever you're at in the world, talking about some of the initial setup and administrative functions that you'll need to do or complete inside of ProConnect Tax. My name is Ross Olsen. I am a senior solution specialist here at Intuit, which really just means that I get to help firms like yours solve problems. Now, for this session, that problem may just be, how do I get up and running in ProConnect? Or I'm new to ProConnect. What do I need to know to get things off the ground as far as being able to use the software, to use the program effectively? And that's what we'll be spending our time on today. Admittedly, not the most exciting or energetic of topics, but we'll be doing this hopefully in a way that keeps you, I don't want to say entertained. I want to say it's going to be a sideshow act or something goofy, but at least something that will make this content, which isn't super exciting, at least informative, and so you're not going to have to come back later and figure out what piece did you miss, why is this not working inside the software. Those are the things we want to avoid, and that's really the goal of this session. Let's take a look at the agenda to be a little bit more specific. We'll be here for about 1 hour. This session is, again, designed for those folks that are maybe new to ProConnect Tax, are getting set up for the first time. It's not intended to be a data entry or how to prepare a tax return session. This is going to be, what are the things that we need to do behind the scenes in the software so that we can prepare a tax return. We'll look at things like your firm identifiers, which may be a little bit of a rehash if you're really familiar with some of these terms and acronyms. But for those of you new to tax preparation, or maybe some of you just need a refresher, we'll cover those first. We'll talk about how to verify your EFIN so that you can electronically file, and maybe even what an EFIN is for those of you that maybe are unaware or not familiar with that. We'll talk about prepare information and getting those users and the people that are going to be inside of your instance of ProConnect Tax set up so that they can actually sign in and start doing work inside of the software. And then we'll turn our attention to a few customizations or settings that will help as you're doing things like printing and keeping returns organized throughout the year, as well as being able to manage and see the data inside of ProConnect Tax more effectively. That's our agenda for today. Again, for about an hour, we'll be covering this content. A quick disclaimer here. Listen, not a whole lot that we're going to have around tax law or tax guidance, but just be aware that this session is educational in nature. Things can change quickly, and if something changes really rapidly, you'll want to make sure that you're keeping up to date with that information outside of just this webinar session. So a quick disclaimer there. But we'll go ahead and move on to our first section, as mentioned, which are those firm identifiers. So firm identifiers are where we're going to kick things off. So these are sometimes a little bit of an alphabet soup where you've got a mixture of, what are these acronyms? What do they mean? For some of you, again, very familiar. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is going to help us have that baseline of what are we talking about? What do we mean when we say these things? And then we can move forward with kind of that shared understanding. And apologies if everyone already has a shared understanding, but it helps to make sure we're all on the same page. So first, customer account number. This is an Intuit firm identifier, this section that we're talking about here. That is your customer account number associated with your Intuit professional tax account. So this is something that is going to be related to your purchase for ProConnect Tax. If you're in ProConnect Tax now, maybe trying it out, but you haven't purchased anything, you might not see that customer account number yet. That's okay. There's no harm in that. Again, it's associated more to that purchase when you've made the purchase, the credits, and the user access, you'll see that customer account number, and it's assigned by Intuit. So no one else, no other entity is giving you that particular number. Another identity or identifier for your firm as far as Intuit's concerned is your realm. Your realm is also known as your QuickBooks company ID over in QuickBooks Online Accountant. And keep that in mind as well as you're getting things set up, is that your QuickBooks Online Accountant account is connected. It's the same platform as Intuit ProConnect Tax. So in essence, you will share your realm or company ID across ProConnect Tax and the connected QuickBooks Online Accountant profile or account that is set up there. So that information will be shared across. You won't ever have more than one realm associated to one customer account number or vice versa. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Always mention too at the beginning, if you're just getting started, if you're not quite sure, this is an important thing to check on early on to make sure that if you're using or utilizing QuickBooks Online Accountant, if you want to use some of those integrations with, prep for taxes, making sure your clients are shared across those two locations, we want to make sure that your realm in ProConnect Tax matches your company ID in QuickBooks Online Accountant. That's an important thing to be aware of early, because it's easier to get that adjusted sooner than after you've started preparing returns and building your client database up inside of ProConnect Tax. So something to keep in mind there. Some additional firm identifiers, now shifting from Intuit letters and numbers and IDs to more of on the federal side. These are probably more common, probably something you're more familiar with if you've been in the industry for a while, if you're not necessarily new to tax preparation or a business. It's the business itself. The first we'll start with is the employer identification number, an EIN. Something to be aware of just because it is something that can be entered inside of ProConnect Tax. Now, if you don't have an EIN, it's not necessarily a requirement, but something that you could have associated with your business, again, if you are operating as a business entity outside of maybe a sole proprietorship. But employer identification number. The second is your PTIN. The reason we have these both here is because they're often confused. You just have one for the other, so they're not the same. They are separate. Your PTIN is associated to an individual, and it's your preparer tax identification number. And for any paid preparer, you need to have this to prepare returns. If you're an enrolled agent, you have to have a PTIN as well. And you can see the link there again in the Docs tab if you need to access this later to get a PTIN. You can apply for it, renew it if needed. Now, you don't need a PTIN necessarily to use ProConnect Tax, but if you're a paid preparer, if you're, preparing returns for clients, generally it's going to be required, but it won't necessarily be something that will limit you inside of ProConnect Tax, especially if you're doing something like non-paid preparer, self-prepared. Those options do exist inside the program, but this is probably something you're going to want entered. And the third number that gets mixed up in these three, EIN, PTIN, the third is the EFIN, EFIN. I've heard it different ways depending on what it is, but EFIN is the way that I will typically describe it. This is your electronic filing identification number. Again, these three oftentimes are meshed together. One's referred to the other. We'll get documents that are for one when we really need something for the other. The electronic filing identification number is something needed if you're electronically filing returns in ProConnect. So there's consumer software out there that you don't need an EFIN. It's being filed through kind of a third party. In professional tax software, you are the transmitter. You're electronically filing, and that's where this EFIN comes into play, so that you can e-file your client's tax returns inside of ProConnect Tax. If you don't have an EFIN, acting sooner is always better. It can take some time to get an EFIN, especially during busier times of the year. So you want to make sure you take some time in advance to apply for this, because it's something where you will not be able to electronically file without it. You can still use the tax software. You can still prepare returns. You could even paper file If needed, there are requirements or stipulations around paper filing, but you can do that inside of ProConnect Tax. But if you need to e-file, or if you're required to e-file, you have to have your EFIN before you can do so. We'll talk a little bit later about your EFIN and kind of talking about applying for that. So we'll come back to that before we move on here. Two final things here that can help to, just so you're aware. These are less commonly confused with those other three, the EFIN, the PTIN, and the EIN, but these do come up as well. The first is your ERO PIN. This is essentially the signature on the e-file authorization page. It can be chosen by you. It's something where they recommend keeping it the same for all your clients in the season as you're signing this. The ERO is yourself, the electronic return originator. That's you. That's why you need an EFIN. So they kind of go hand in hand. And this is something that will be used in place essentially of your signature on that 8879 or that e-file authorization form. You pick it, or at least part of it. The first 6 are always going to be your EFIN, your EFIN, but this is something picked for you to act as your signature. And then the flip side to that, the designee PIN, is something that your client can choose if they want someone other than you or the preparer to discuss that with the IRS. So it is essentially serving as that third party designee process. So there's that key information as far as those letters, the acronyms, the numbers. Those identifiers are important. As I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about one of those, which is the EFIN registration. For the most part, the other pieces we talked about, you can enter them right inside the program, and we'll take a look. I'm going to jump into the software too, but you can pretty much enter those without anyone else being involved. The EFIN is a little bit different because it is a number that requires verification from Intuit before you can start electronically filing. This is something, and as mentioned, you have to register with Intuit. And the whole idea behind this, the reason why, the rationale, it's not just because we want you to jump through hoops. That's not the intention at all. This is a security measure to make sure that we're not allowing fraudulent filers to easily just submit a number and start filing with someone else's EFIN. And it also ensures that you're not having more than one person using your EFIN within our professional tax solutions. So it's just a security measure, as well as a little bit of a licensing measure too, because you're limited to one EFIN per customer account number per account. So you can't have multiple EFINs or multiple different firms or preparers using one product license to file returns from. So a little bit of a two-part piece there. I can tell you from experience, the primary motive for this or function for this is that security piece. And it's also why we ask you to submit it for verification instead of just submitting it and rolling with whatever number you wanted to go with inside of the program. Because if we wanted to, we could just say that's your number and you can't change it. This verification step is more specifically for that security piece and making sure that we're reducing the chances of fraudulent filing using your EFIN or other EFINs, anyone's EFIN that someone had found and is using maliciously. Now, as I mentioned, you have to have this EFIN to electronically file. Your EFIN, it's not just apply for it and you're good to go. Your EFIN does have to be considered active and accepted, right? So just submitting the application isn't enough. And that's frankly not on us. If you try to e-file with an EFIN that's not active or accepted, you won't be able to e-file, period. That it'll be turned away. The IRS will not accept it. So that's something to keep in mind too, is when we do this verification process, we're also going to make sure that your EFIN is where it needs to be in order to electronically file. You don't necessarily need to register your EFIN if you're not going to e-file returns. Some firms do prepare returns that are only paper filed, or they decide to paper file only. That can happen, and some firms don't have an EFIN. If you have already submitted your EFIN and you can e-file, your name and address hasn't changed, you're not doing this every year. You're not doing this separately. If your customer account number is the same, you're able to e-file under that customer account number, you don't have to resubmit your EFIN documentation. That includes firms coming from ProSeries or Lacert that have the same customer account number, when they move to ProConnect Tax, you don't have to resubmit your EFIN documentation. It's all associated or connected to your account, so keep that in mind as well. Now, if you do need to change, and we'll talk about this too, I'm sure, but if you do need to change your firm name or address now or in the future, you do need to submit that. Again, I'll talk more about that in just a moment. There are two different formats that you can use. You can use that EFIN acceptance letter. So you'll get that letter in the mail within the last 12 months, a calendar year. If you have that EFIN acceptance letter, you can submit that. Or if you go to the IRS e-services page, if you have an EFIN that you've used for many years, more than 1 year, you can go to that IRS e-services page and you can grab the EFIN e-file application summary. Now, you don't have to do that if it's not the only option. In other words, if you filed for your EFIN last month, you can also submit the application summary. The key thing to mention here is the only time you can submit the EFIN acceptance letter is if it's dated within the last 12 months. But for any person, any firm, you could submit the application summary, and that will work regardless of when you applied for your EFIN. So not to confuse, it's not you have to submit the acceptance letter if it's within 12 months. You can, or anyone can submit the application summary for that EFIN verification. Here's what that e-file EFIN application summary looks like from the IRS e-services page. So you can see the document here. It's highlighted that the status that of this EFIN is accepted and that the EFIN is active. Let me switch over here so you can see this more in a full screen view. That would be a little tiny, but this is what it looks like. Also wanted to call out when you're doing this. Now we have resources that can share how you can share this with us. There's articles and video guides for this too outside of this session. But wanted to call out, you'll notice towards the top of the application summary, it says print and home. Print and home. It's where it says, it's underneath where it says application status in orange, and to the right of the application summary header, you'll see print and home. That is where you can click on print to print this as a PDF. That's what you need to submit. Print it as a PDF, and then you can submit that PDF for your EFIN verification. That's the easiest process to do this with. Some firms will do a screenshot. That can work too, but make sure you have the entire EFIN application summary and you're not cutting off any of the key details there, especially showing that your EFIN is active and that you have been accepted as an electronic return originator. As I had mentioned earlier, there is one EFIN per CAN. So again, this is more of a licensing, but also security. We don't, it usually isn't the case that firms will have, a location will have several EFINs to file from, but also from the point of licensing is it's not allowed to have multiple EFINs per account. So keep that in mind. Your doing business as name, your DBA, and your address will be reflected inside of ProConnect the exact same way that it appears on that application summary. If that's not the way that you want your name, or that's not the address that you would like to appear inside of ProConnect Tax, you'll want to make sure you first update it with the IRS via the e-services. So where you go to apply for your EFIN, or where you access that EFIN application summary page, update your firm name / address there, reprint it as a PDF and submit it, and we'll change your name and address in the software to match what is on that updated EFIN application summary. So again, not terribly complicated a process, but it's something to be aware of. Another caveat here that gets asked quite a bit: if you are changing your EIN. So if you get a new EIN, maybe you've reorganized your business, you've merged, connect, whatever, you have a new EIN. You can go into the IRS e-services and change your firm name and address, but if you change or need to change your EIN, you'll actually need to submit a request for a new EFIN. So you'll need to reapply to get a new EFIN. So if that applies to you, remember my recommendation is act sooner rather than later, because when it gets busy, it can take longer to get a new EFIN accepted and approved, make sure you're going through that process, applying with your new EIN, your new business entity. You don't have to change your customer account number. You don't necessarily have to change your realm or your company ID. But if you do need that new EFIN, because if you've changed your EIN, you need a new EFIN, which does necessitate you applying for a new one and going through that verification step again in order to electronically file. So keep that in mind. If you do change your EIN, that you will have to go through this process again, kind of similar to as if you were starting for the first time in regards to the EFIN. Okay, moving on now to prepare information. Prepare information, just as we had firm identifiers, these are going to be pieces that pertain more to the individuals or those folks, those users inside the software. So when you're adding a preparer, these are separate from users. A preparer, that's the person whose name is going to appear on the return. You can have more than one preparer inside of ProConnect Tax. You may only have one, that's fine. But you need to make sure you include these key details. Make sure you have their name, their email, their ERO PIN, their PTIN, and any state identifiers that they may need. As I mentioned, not all ProConnect users are preparers, but all preparers are going to be invited as a user. So users are the more broad term for anyone that's going to be inside of ProConnect Tax. Anyone who signs into ProConnect Tax will be a user, but preparers are more of a special type of user. They're the people or the individuals whose name, their details are associated with the return as the paid preparer. So keep that in mind as well. You can always update any preparer information you need. There's no verification step, no process for that. You're able to do that in the software on your own to add those preparers. And if you're missing something, there will be a diagnostic. There'll be an alert to let you know we're missing that ERO PIN or your PTIN if you've marked it as a paid preparer return. So keep that in mind as well. Let's actually jump into the software. We'll take a little bit of a closer look at some of these pieces that we've been talking about, in particular the preparer information, and as well as some of the firm information too. So let me switch things over for us, and here we go. So we're inside ProConnect Tax now. I'm going to zoom in just a smidge so we can see things hopefully a little bit better. And as mentioned, all this exciting stuff down here, we're not going to be spending too terribly much time on that. Maybe a little bit later with organization and how to find things. But we're going to be spending, at least at the beginning here, we've been spending our time in this gear icon under settings. And this is where you can find that prepare information and the firm information. We're going to come back here for the users eventually. Let's start here is where we left off, or we were talking about at the beginning, the firm information. So here you can see firm name, address, phone, federal ID. You can edit this information if you need to, but this is not going to be something, again, editing this information is not the verification process that we'll have as listed here in the middle column that shows EFIN verification. This is the firm name that will print on the return. So as you can see, even though I've entered a separate name as my firm name here, which can be something that will print, maybe on the letters, or you can have it print on some of those settings outside of the main tax return. This firm name is going to be what's associated with your firm, with your ERO, you as the electronic return originator, your EFIN number here as well. You can't change these. This is where you have to update EFIN information. And notice on this right-hand side here, under firm information, you'll find some helpful links for how to apply for an EFIN, verify your EFIN, updating that, and assigning a default firm contact. In fact, that's kind of what we'll look at next under settings. Under prepare information, this is where you can add preparers. As I had mentioned, not every user is going to need to be added here, but this is where you can put their key information in, their designation, and then their contact and for their phone, their ERO PIN, their contact information, with their credentials potentially. I will say, I always mention this, usually you do not need to enter their social security number here. My recommendation or best practice here is go ahead, leave that blank. If you need that, you'll get a diagnostic for most filing. That's not required, PTIN will be here as well. You also need to make sure you check the box that you verified that PTIN. And then also notice the state credentials, the state numbers that will be applicable to those of you filing in certain states. Looks like New York and Oregon are the main, and California are the main ones listed there. So entering this information for the preparer will add that preparer. And you can also go back here if you need to edit or delete preparers, and notice that you do need to have someone as the default contact, that primary default contact. What this will do is that if you do not select a preparer for a return, it's going to default to this paid preparer. So keep that in mind. It'll default there. Again, you'll get a diagnostic too if something is missing. You can also search, if you have many paid preparers, you can search through this list of preparers here. We're going to be spending some time in just a moment in this, in this next section, the manage and invite users section. Rather than jump right out and jump back in, just a quick overview here. As mentioned, the individuals entered into this particular screen or user management are going to be anyone that needs to log in to use the software, that will need access to ProConnect, that will need access to Intuit Tax Advisor, and potentially even QuickBooks Online Accountant. Remember, it is a shared environment, a shared space. So this is where you can manage those users in particular. So we'll come back to that in just a moment. Let's shift things back over here to that particular topic in manage and invite users. So here's a link you can click on in the presentation slides. And this is where you can go to see this, after the fact today, if you'd like to review this process. You don't have to remember it, right? It's not about it's not a memorization game to remember exactly what was done here, but this at least will give you a guide in the future if you need that. And this is something too where it's not terribly complicated, but there are a lot of different roles and permissions. So having a resource or something that you can refer to, because you're not doing this all the time, this may be something that you go and manage, maybe initially set up, but then occasionally throughout the year, maybe just at the beginning of tax season as you're kind of getting new individuals set up, or at the end of tax season if you're removing permissions or taking individuals out. So you probably won't have this, perfectly memorized. So a resource like this is helpful. And also I'll show some of those guides or helpful links inside the program as you're doing this as well. As I've mentioned a few times now, anyone that signs into ProConnect will need to be added as a user. Anyone associated with QBOA, with that QuickBooks Online company ID, will be in there as well. They don't necessarily need to have permissions that enable full access to both, but you'll see those users listed kind of across the platform or across that realm. There are different levels of user access in ProConnect. There's standard access. Standard access is included. It's kind of the default, but you don't have to pay or have a advanced user access fee associated with everyone within your firm. And standard users, or this level of user access, they're going to be able to do that data entry work, use e-signature, invoice, reach out to support. There's more functionalities they have here. It's essentially those individuals that are going to be working in the program, but they don't need more of the advanced features like being able to e-file and print the return, utilizing Intuit Link, so that collaboration hub to send out requests for documents, sending the K1 packages or grabbing IRS transcripts directly from the software, also reporting in the Intuit Tax Advisor client report. That's something where if you need those more detailed pieces, you would need to be set up as or invited as an advanced user. And those advanced users seats or access grants, those are purchased again so that you can decide how many individuals at your firm need that advanced access. Up to 10, and then it's unlimited. So if you need 10 or more advanced users, you don't pay for the 11th and up. It's 10 or more, but keep that in mind as you're using the program. Not everyone needs to be an advanced user, but everyone will be in at least as a standard user. And the link here on this slide will explain more about those roles, but I'll also show you that inside the software. client access is kind of the final piece to inviting or managing users here. And this is where you can just tell the program what clients does each person, each user have access to. And so in ProConnect Tax, if you don't have access to a client, you don't see them. It's as if they do not exist to you. So if you want to invite someone and assign them access to 5 clients, to them, ProConnect will look like it only has 5 clients included. It doesn't show everyone's tax return or everyone's profile, but they can't click on it. It just won't show it. It'll be as if they do not exist to that user inside of ProConnect Tax. You can make individuals inactive. You can edit them. And be aware too that sometimes there are inactive clients that exist that you may or may not need access to as well. So sometimes your client list is divided by those users that are, or those clients that are active or inactive. And the same is true for your people that you invited. If you've made someone inactive, you'll be able to manage them as well. So we already started looking at that. Let's actually shift back over to that particular section. Let's see here if I get that pulled back up. We shouldn't have gone too far. Perfect. So here are, again, the user access, or kind of the list of users that we have. Notice that I can edit any of these to go in and make changes if needed. When you're adding a user for the first time, you'll have to put in their contact information, first, last name, and email. And this is where you can assign roles. As I mentioned, advanced, you'll see those 3 levels. Those are the advanced user access. And again, not everyone needs to be an admin, right? Maybe just tax, maybe tax and books for QuickBooks Online Accountant, but those will give them the full permissions inside of ProConnect Tax. If they don't need those full permissions and are more of a standard user, they could still have that standard all access or no access, limited customers. All of these roles, and there are a few, as you can see, are listed here in the role descriptions. So you can see in this list a little bit more about what you'll need to know to assign individuals. In general, you're probably going to want to stick, or it's not want, it's most firms that I work with will use either one of the 3 advanced roles here or the standard roles, generally all access or no access. Again, you can see here in the description what that means or what each of those means, but your standard all access essentially is going to give you full access to QuickBooks Online Accountant and ProConnect Tax, whereas the no access will give you some permissions for QuickBooks Online Accountant, but no accounting features, and will let you utilize ProConnect Tax as a standard user. Notice too, and this is actually really helpful, you can see that some of these have suggested roles. So maybe for your tax data entry folks, that standard no access would be where you'd want to be. But then if you're up here into, you're the owner, or you're an admin, you're a staff preparer, maybe you need advanced tax and books access. And for you owners and partners, you should probably have admin, advanced tax and books admin access. But these descriptions will help you just determine how best to assign those roles to users. The final piece here too, as I get into the second to the penultimate piece here, I guess, the second to last, is that you do have some ability to customize some of these permissions to say what do and what don't you have access to. Those are going to be dependent on what your role is. So you can get a little bit more specific, or if you'll excuse the phrase, in the weeds, or granular, sometimes people call it. You have some finer controls around permissions too. Not complete, specific controls. As you see here, you're not able to adjust this for your standard users because that's for advanced users only, but you'll have the ability to adjust some of these pieces within here, like external integrations, for example. If you wanted this individual to have external integrations, you could check the box to allow for that in this permissions section. Now the final piece here, before we move on, is, as I mentioned, as you're inviting clients, you'll see your entire client list below. Now, maybe you want them to have access to every client. Perfect. Just check the box. If not, if there's select clients, you can search for them here to find them, and you can click on their name to give them access. And now if you invite this client, they would just have access to those 2 clients that you've checked or more. So you're able to adjust that. Now you can include additional rows here if you want to see more clients. And also you can include your inactive clients, as I mentioned. Be aware of that because you may want to, if there's inactive clients, we might want to assign to them or not be assigned to them. That's something to be aware of as well. But this is where you can edit that client access. All of this can be changed later. So as a best practice, generally, it's recommended to add a user and start with more restrictive permissions and add them as needed if you're not quite sure. Not for everyone, right? If you're the firm owner or your partner is being invited, sure, they can have access to everything. But when you're inviting individuals, generally it's better to start with less permissions and add more as they need it instead of giving them, the full keys to the castle type of an experience. But that is the manage users or the add users process inside of ProConnect Tax. So we're going to move on and start in that neighborhood of settings with print settings. So let me shift things over here to our print settings. Now, these print settings, to be clear, in case you're curious why maybe this isn't working on older returns, this will start or begin with tax year 22. So if you're in the 21 or earlier programs, you won't necessarily have these full settings. So keep that in mind as just a quick disclaimer. As always, or at least for this session, I've included a link here to a guide that will help you with print settings so you can update them. But to break this down very briefly, there's 3 different levels of print settings that you can adjust. This is what will print with the return or what will print with that setting. So you can decide form order, forms that will be generated, that type of thing. And you can adjust it for 3 separate levels on a client copy level, on a preparer copy level, and on the government copy, or sometimes called the filing copy. So some things you may want to include for the client, you don't want to have on the government copy. Same is true for the preparer copy. You may want things there that are not on the client copy or the government copy. All those adjustments can be made, and you can see kind of a quick overview there of what those mean. Pretty self-explanatory, but these settings can be adjusted inside the program, and we're going to jump right back in. So we want to take a look at that, those print settings, so you can visualize what that looks like. So let me share my screen again inside of ProConnect Tax. We left off here on the user management, and again, we're spending our time in the settings, and in this case, we're going to go over into print settings. As mentioned, this is for tax year 22 and forward. And here you can see the settings that we can adjust for the different return types. So you'll notice to adjust these, you can decide what type of form set you're wanting to adjust. And then down below, you'll see the different copies you can toggle between or adjust between. So for example, the default client copy may have some of these worksheets. The preparer copy will as well, but the government copy will just have more of that general information. Of course, won't have the client correspondence, but you can navigate between these 3 tabs to adjust what this is or what is included. If you click these chevrons or these carets, you can expand these areas to further add some of those sub topics. So for example, in the client copy, in the general category, we will give them the tax summary and the financial or transaction summary, but we're not giving them the diagnostics or the override, that sort of thing. If we wanted to give them those, we could check the box if we wanted that to print with the client copy, but that's how you can manage what will be given or what will be printed when you print that client copy. The same is true, for preparer copy. In this case, yeah, we do want those diagnostics, but I don't really need the tax summary in my copy, or maybe I do. Actually, I would like that. I'm going to go ahead and make that adjustment. The final piece to this is being able to click on these and drag them. So if for whatever reason you wanted certain information to appear before or after. So maybe right at the top here, I have the summary and the diagnostics. I actually, for my client copy, would like that to appear first instead of the correspondence, so that it more closely matches the preparer copy. So they get the summary information first and then they get their correspondence. Or you say that doesn't make any sense. I want to give them that client letter first. Let's go ahead and keep that at the top. You can use this to adjust the order that these will print for those various copies. Saving these settings will save this for this tax return type. If you need to make any adjustments in the other types, you would select that type and make those changes the exact same way you did with that initial type. So that's how you can adjust those print settings. And very quickly here, just to reinforce that, if I just open one of my clients here and go to the final section of File Return, this is where you can print the return from. Now this one's got a few things outstanding before we'd want to do that, but this is where you can choose when you're printing, and we'll talk more about some of these customizations too with the print settings. This is where you can choose what copy you want to print and what client letter you would like to print. The client letter is actually our next topic, and we're going to move over to that right now. So the client letter, as we saw, is a section on the return that prints. It can be included or not, depending on the copy or the type of return you're being print, but you can customize those letters. Now, by default, the letter inside of ProConnect Tax will be dynamically built or customized based on what's going on in your client's tax return. So it's already going to be customized by default, but maybe you want to adjust some of the wording, remove some sections, include some extra pieces. You have full reign to customize this letter to say or look however you would like it to look, with a few considerations. So before you start, again, as with the print settings, this started with tax year 22 and earlier. Only admins, so your general users, advanced or basic, cannot create or modify any templates. They're shared with everyone in the firm, English only, and there's no images that can be added. So you can't insert pictures or image files into the letter. They're already printed. So this is a default thing. You don't have to turn this on by default, but you can edit these letters to say what you need them to say. The structure of these letters are basically organized by sections. So you have each sections that are going to be included either by default or only when that is relevant. So I mentioned it's created dynamically or custom for your client. Something like the hello or the salutation or the signature, it's always going to be there. But other sections like amount owed or estimated payment, they would only be included on a return that has an amount owed or that have estimated payments. So that's what I mean by dynamically generated. When you're customizing these letters, you can insert keywords. These act like placeholders or can insert data inside of the letter that's pulled from the tax return itself. So moving back into that section here, let's do that where we left off. We'll start here again a little bit towards the end, but you can see inside of the tax return itself, we have various letters, the original and maybe some edits that I've made or that we've made as a firm that I can pick from here to choose from. Now I can go to this review letter settings, or again, my gear icon will also take me to the client letters if I need to. Reviewing those letter settings are where you can make these adjustments. So notice that I'm in the 1040. I can go back. I can see more information. I can customize this copy if I need be. In fact, let me just jump back to my list of templates. So I can see the original letter. This will be included by default. I can make a copy of this so that I can customize it. I can view it. And when you make a copy, which is what we see here, I can then take that copy and customize it. Or in this case, I made a copy that I'm going to customize. And here is where I can look at this information on screen and adjust how I want it to appear. So I can choose, just the general orientation or the alignment. I can adjust information. Here's an example of a placeholder. Dear, then we have the brackets for it's going to pull that from the return itself. And if I want to edit any of these, so there's a balance due of here's the placeholder for how much is due, I can just type any additional words as needed. And if I need to insert a placeholder in any of these sections, I can do that. So if I wanted to include a placeholder for their federal overpayment with their amended return, or here is what your vacation home depreciation is for this year, inserting these into this letter will insert that placeholder so that when this federal tax due section generates, it will include my edit and a placeholder here as well. So that lets you really get into this to customize it how you need. My recommendation for this is use the default letter as you're getting started. And then if you need to make any changes, something doesn't quite look right, see where that is coming from the letter, what section is that part of, and you can come into this section and make an adjustment. You don't need to make an adjustment that would necessarily apply for everyone that becomes your new default, but maybe you want to make that adjustment for this client or that type of client. You can do so, and you can have multiple different templates here. So you may have templates for your Schedule C clients, your business clients that have certain activities or certain inputs or data that you need from them or need them to be aware of. So that will allow you full range of customization as well. I think our final section here, as we get ready to kind of wrap things up, our final two are the tax return filters. These are the ability to adjust what returns you're looking at inside of ProConnect Tax. So you're able to filter your tax returns by return type, by e-file progress, by e-signature status, and by the return status, which you can customize and edit to be what fits your firm's workflow the best. You can also sort by who is assigned to the return. And those assignees are something that you can use outside of who the paid preparer is, but who's working on the return. It gives you a little bit of a practice management element of assigning the return until it's complete. And anyone at the firm can go and click on their name, for example, and see which returns have been assigned to them. Now, instead of jumping, this actually is good. It looks like we're where we need to be as we wrap things up here. So a quick jump into the program to highlight these filters or this basic client workflow management, as I've called it. We will go ahead and jump into or back into ProConnect Tax for, I think, the last time here. And we'll be able to see this from the tax return hub. This is where you can see those filters at the top, as I mentioned, by return type, by e-file progress, e-signature status, return status, and assignee. And the two elements here that I want you to be aware of primarily are when you're looking at by return status or any of these filters, you can click on these boxes to further see below just those particular qualities. So in this case, by return type, all by default, but if I just want to look at my 1040, I can filter to that. If I want to see my e-signature status of those that are complete, I can do that. And I can go into my settings and go into my client statuses and adjust those to include as many statuses as I need. And all of those statuses can be assigned directly here on the return. So any of these that are do not file, extended, new client, whatever these statuses are that you want them to be, you can create those and then have those as the filter. And then finally, by assignee, will let you see who's working on this return, who is this assigned to, so that if you're wanting to see, let's see here, a lot of people at my firm, but if you're wanting to see, for example, oh, okay, I only have Katie assigned to me right now, you can do that. And then when you're done or wanting to switch this over, you can change who this return is assigned to from this view, but also from within this return, you'll see assignee at the top along with the status. So you can make that change here on who the return is assigned to, as well as what the status is, without having to jump into the tax return hub. But this functionality allows you to easily navigate between ProConnect Tax as you're looking at clients inside the program. And we're going to go ahead and just wrap things up here since we are at time. So some final pieces here as you're getting started. Definitely utilize these support resources, the community and the accountant support page. Lots of resources to find if you need assistance, if you want to talk to your peers on how they do things, what their best practices are, or how they handle certain situations. Definitely recommend that, as well as continuing with what you're doing today. There's webinars and videos and all kinds of resources out there to help you with training yourself and your staff. Keep those available at hand so that you can utilize those when needed. Thank you so much for attending this session today. I hope it was beneficial. I hope it, not the most exciting session when it comes to talking about acronyms and basic setup of the program. But now that you've hopefully have this firm foundation of this good base, you'll be off to the races when it comes to actually preparing those returns, getting things done for your clients, and managing your firm going forward. So thanks again. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, rest of the week, rest of the tax season. And until next time, bye for now.
That's it. You've got the setup down and you're ready to run. Now your firm can onboard faster, work smarter, and tackle tax season with confidence. Want to keep this momentum going? Head to accountants.intuit.com/training, where you'll find hands-on resources, free CPE and CE credits, webinars, articles, podcasts, and everything you need to master ProConnect Tax. Let's keep building your expertise.